pretty significant coaching news with this one right here, as USC defensive coordinator D'Anton Lynn has signed an extension. And this is significant for a few reasons here. Number one, he had improved this SC defense in a big way this year, which with Lincoln Riley as head coach, you expect the offense to be in a good spot. It wasn't perfect this past year, but it looks like it's headed towards being in a good place with Jaden Mayava, quarterback this year. Defensively, they took a huge leap forward this year, have recruited at a very high level on that side of the football, have added some good veteran pieces here in the transfer portal. And D'Anton Lynn played at Penn State, which is the most high-profile opening in terms of a coordinator job on the market right now, as Tom Allen left last week to Clemson. So they keep him there in Southern California. I'm sure the timing couldn't have been better for him. He got a nice extension. I'm sure got paid pretty handsomely from his name floating around in that Penn State talk. But if you're a Trojan fan, the continuity and keeping a guy home that was wanted by a Penn State program that is consistently a top 10 team with James Franklin at the helm.
Yeah, this was a huge get. You look at the improvement of the defense just statistically. You're talking about 34.4 points per game during the 23 season when you had an elite number one overall pick quarterback. That drops to 24.1 this year. Obviously, you probably wish you had this kind of defense with that kind of quarterback at the same time. The quarterback wasn't as productive this year with Miller Moss and Jaden Mayava having inconsistencies. But that was an incredible increase in terms of yards per game, 377 yards per game. The year before, we're talking about 432 yards per game, which is 119th in FBS. So you go from the bottom to, not where you want to be, but a considerable improvement. So Lynn had a lot of success at UCLA. He was an NFL position coach and a defensive assistant for almost 8 years in the NFL. He has that experience. Texas native, Plano, Texas native, and like you mentioned, Penn State alum. So that Penn State job was looming large. Lynn ultimately chooses to remain at USC. I wonder if that was leveraged to get that extension. I don't know that to be the case. Sergeant Morhew thinks he said no to the Pennsylvania Winters. Maybe that's part of it too. But Penn State's a pretty good job for a defensive coordinator. You've seen Brent Pry get a head coaching job in the ACC. Manny Diaz get a head coaching job in the ACC. Tom Allen get a raise to go to the ACC at Clemson. It's kind of ACC pipeline, right? And James Franklin, he's always going to be bringing in top recruits. But Lynn ultimately goes to USC. And what does he have to work with? Look, you got Jamal Jarrett, 4-star transfer, big body from Georgia at defensive tackle. Keyshawn Silver, same thing, 6'4", 336-pound body, 4-star transfer from Kentucky, former 5-star going to USC. So you've upgraded the middle tremendously just from a size standpoint, an athleticism and size standpoint. These are big athletes, high pedigreed guys coming from Georgia. Keyshawn Silver come from UNC where he was a 5-star player. So, and then ultimately transferred to Kentucky. So, these guys are really, really hard to find from a body type standpoint. And Lynn's already made improvements without those guys. Bear Alexander really didn't give him much this year, ultimately transfers to Oregon. So I think that beef in the middle is going to allow him to compete more in that Big Ten, where you saw sometimes the physicality overwhelm USC. Again, USC had major improvements on defense, but we saw games where after a while, the physicality of these Big Ten running games started to wear on that USC front. Adding those to the mix, plus you're adding Thanos himself, Jakeem Stewart, one of the most ballyhooed defensive tackles in this class, borderline 5-star player, depending where you look. So the beef's been added. Lynn is back. This defense needs to improve to make up for what, an offense that it's Lincoln Riley. You expect it to be good, but there's no Caleb Williams right now. You do hope Mayava makes a leap, but you're missing some receivers. You had a Prince Strawn from Boise State. That'll help, but you lose a Deuce Robinson. You lose a Zechariah Branch. You lose a Kyron Hudson. It's a lot of turnover here. Running back room completely shifted. You got Waymon Jordan now in the mix from junior college. You got Eli Sanders transferring in. So a lot of new faces here. What's a pivotal year for Lincoln Riley. At least you have the continuity with Lynn.
And with Lynn, just to wrap things up on him, a really impressive background for him, and looks like a legitimate rising star in the business. This is a guy who he spent his entire career in the NFL as a coach, from 2014 to 2022, which his last job in the NFL was the safeties coach of the Ravens, which that's a very, very good job historically. I would say those guys seem to know what they're doing in terms of coaching the defensive side of the football. But was at UCLA for a year as a D coordinator, then went to USC, and has now leveraged himself, put himself in a really, really good position here, as he's gotten this extension, has a ton of talent coming in. But I could see him being a head coach here in the very near future, and I'm not surprised to see him get big time opportunities to be a coordinator in the NFL as well.
Yeah, you got D3 Mysticals G saying that sacrilegious to have Pac-10 teams like this, traditional Pac-10 teams playing in this Midwestern league, traditionally Midwestern league. I tend to agree. We'll see how this all shakes out once the super leagues find their final resting place. I don't think they're there yet, but I agree. But look, in the meantime, you need to build a team that is going to play against those type of teams. And you look at the college football playoff. Penn State makes the Final Four. Ohio State, the favorite to win the championship. Notre Dame, not a Big Ten team, but a team that's going to be on USC's schedule that plays that physical style. Of course, they're in the championship. So you got to play tough defense. You got to have beef up front. They've added some beef up front to the portal, and they keep the continuity with Lynn.